Real talk. What is that uncomfortable conversation that you've been avoiding? I know you have one. It's with that underperforming team member, or maybe with a business partner that you're not on the same page about, or maybe it's with your mom or your best friend. We all have that conversation, the uncomfortable, awkward conversation that we don't want to have. We've been putting it off and it is just driving us crazy. Well, to quote a mentor of mine, Leila Hormozi, she says, your success is directly proportional to the number of uncomfortable conversations you are willing to have. And that was tough for me because I am an incredibly conflict avoidant person. And so what I did is I figured out a way to have these incredibly uncomfortable conversations in a way that was no longer uncomfortable. And I learned and I practiced and I ultimately developed it into a framework that I call Van Talk. And this one framework has transformed me, my company, and the hundreds of clients that I have taught it to. And in this video, I want to share the full breakdown with you so that you feel able to lean in, have the hard conversation in a way that actually strengthens relationships, in a way that moves your business forward and does all of that without the discomfort and without the drama. So Van Talk, let's get into it. I call this framework Van Talk because I learned it while I was living in a van. I was living and traveling full time in this van with my boyfriend at the time, who was also the CEO of the business where I was the COO. So if you can imagine for a moment, two people living together, working together in a living space the size of a prison cell. Oh, and I didn't mention, we took the van to South America, another continent where I didn't speak the language and I had no friends for thousands of miles. So you can imagine in that kind of pressure cooker situation, how important communication is. And so it was in that pressure cooker that forged Van Talk, which is a way of having the most important, deepest, crunchiest, most uncomfortable conversations in a way that avoids conflict. Because again, I'm super conflict avoidant. And in a van in South America, conflict is not an option. There's no escape. There's no like going into the other room to cool off or taking a walk around the block or getting a drink with the boys. Conflict can be catastrophic. And here's the thing that I've come to believe, is that you and your team are in a van in South America. Your business is the van. It is this container that you cannot escape from. You can't get out of it. You have to keep showing up every day and working with the same people and working through your differences and your challenges. There is no escape. And so in that environment, we have to learn how to communicate without conflict. Because if we don't, one of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to sit on all of those little things that go unsaid, and we're going to sit and they're going to fester and we're going to get resentful and they're going to build and eventually they're going to explode, right? They're going to explode and we're going to need to fire someone or have a huge fight or maybe lose a business partnership, which I've actually seen, right? Our unwillingness to talk about it leads to some catastrophic event, creates all this drama, and the reality is that it's entirely and completely avoidable. It's entirely avoidable if we learn how to talk about it. Or maybe it doesn't explode, but again, all those little things that go unsaid build up. They build up like plaque on your teeth. And what ultimately happens is that it just slows things down. If you and I can't communicate well, if we don't trust each other, if we don't like each other, if we haven't talked through the differences that would prevent us from working well together, then we will just continue to show up and get less work done, collaborate less effectively. And the result of that in our business is a lack of speed, a lack of growth, and a lack of profit. So best case scenario, our inability to have the uncomfortable conversation slows us down and stalls out our business. Worst case scenario, it leads to huge blow-ups that cost us a ton of time and energy. And for what? It's all entirely avoidable using a framework like Van Talk. Now, I'm not saying that the key to building a world-class team is to shove everybody in a van together and figure it out. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into building, leading an A-player high-performance team. And we've actually developed a tool to help our clients do this. I call it the A-player command center. It's one tool that allows you to measure the performance of every person on your team, set and hold them accountable to high performance standards and targets, and gives you one command center from which you're able to see, do I have the right people doing the right things at the right level of performance that I need? So this has been such a game changer for our clients. We ended up just making it publicly available and free. You can go ahead, grab the A-Player Command Center down in the description. It's a free gift from me to you. And I promise you that when you start building it and rolling it out, you are inevitably going to run into some uncomfortable conversations, because not everyone on your team is currently performing at the level that you need them to. And so when that happens, not if, but when that happens, I want to make sure you are armed and equipped with a framework that will allow you to lean into those conversations and actually have them in such a way that avoids conflict, avoids discomfort. And actually, if we do this correctly, those conversations will lead to us strengthening our relationship with that team member, leaving them more bought in, more engaged, more motivated, and with a foundation that will allow you to build and work well with that person forever moving forward. So, without further ado, Van Talk. What the heck is it? How do we do this? To illustrate Van Talk, I have to tell you a story about the butter. So I was living in this van down by the river, and one day, me and my boyfriend had to have a 2-hour-long conversation about how I unwrap a stick of butter. Yep, butter. Butter is what almost broke us, because every morning I would unwrap the butter and I would get little like buttery filament from the package on my fingertips, and then I would touch other things in the van and get them sticky. And my boyfriend was German, and that drove him absolutely crazy, and he would like fold down the corners of the butter wrapper, and I thought that was absolutely crazy, and we needed to have a conversation about it. We needed to talk about the butter. Why? Because you're in a van in South America, and that butter is getting opened 2 feet in front of your face every day. It was driving him crazy. So we had to talk about the butter. And that's part 1 of Van Talk, which is say what needs to be said. In Van Talk, we are committing to each other, to our team, that if there is something that needs to be said, if there is something we need to talk about, whether that's small, like how I unwrap butter, or big, like your performance in the role, we commit to having the conversation. And we don't let the emotional discomfort or awkwardness hold us back from saying what needs to be said, right? We needed to talk about the butter because every single day, this little thing was pissing him off. And unless we talked about it, it was going to build and build and build and eventually explode. And so saying what needs to be said, I genuinely believe, is an act of respect and an act of service. What you're saying is, I respect you too much to let this little thing get in the way of us working well together. I respect this business too much to let my own emotional discomfort hold me back from saying what needs to be said if I genuinely believe it's going to make our business better. And so the first step of Van Talk is that intention, that we shift our thinking around tough feedback or tough conversations of, oh, I'm hurting this person, or I don't want to hurt their feelings, to actually, I care about this person so much that I will not prevent their growth and their level up from saying what needs to be said. So that's part 1. Say what needs to be said. And then part 2 is hear what needs to be heard. Here's the thing. When my boyfriend was telling me how I unwrap butter, he wasn't attacking me. You know, he wasn't calling me a bad person. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't any of those things. He was saying something because how I unwrapped butter was driving him crazy and was going to prevent us from achieving our shared goal, which was live well in this tiny space together, travel well together, work well together. It actually wasn't even personal. It wasn't even about me. It was actually about the problem, which is how I unwrapped butter. So this is the real unlock of Van Talk, which is that when you're having these tough conversations, is actually never a you versus me. It's not. It's an us versus the problem. And the problem is standing in the way of our shared goal, right? In a company, our shared goal with every single person on our team is to work well together and build the most successful version of our company together. And if there's something that you're doing or that I'm doing that's standing in the way of that goal, it's not personal. I'm not attacking you. I'm stating a problem. And we need to move through this problem together as teammates because the problem is in the way of our shared goal. So hearing what needs to be heard means perceiving and receiving that feedback, that information through that lens, which is that this person's not attacking me. This person isn't malicious. This person isn't coming at me. This person is telling me this as my teammate so that we can look at the problem together. We can fix it together. and we can keep moving towards our shared goal. When we receive these sorts of hard conversations through that lens, what happens is that all of the defensiveness, all of the ego, all of the fight that would have otherwise come up, that is totally normal that it would come up if you feel like someone's attacking you or coming at you, all of that goes away. It literally just fades away. And instead, what we're able to do is hear them. We're able to hear exactly what it is they're trying to communicate to us. We're not busy justifying or validating or defending ourselves. We're just really hearing and understanding what is the problem. And then how is the problem standing in the way of the goal? Because again, the problem is not personal. How I unwrap butter is not personal. And so I don't have to show up to that conversation as if it was. Now I know what you're thinking, which is like, Jhana, the conversation I'm putting off right now is not about how they unwrap butter. It's bigger than that, right? Here's the thing, is that Van Talk scales. That same approach of not you versus me, but us versus the problem. That was the same exact framework and approach that I took when I needed to tell him that, like, you know, his relationship with his dad made me hesitant about him being the father of my children, right? Like, that's a much bigger conversation, but it's still not personal. It's not. It was just a problem standing in the way of a goal. And so as teammates, we got to look at it and work through it together. So these are the two parts of Van Talk, which is that if I have to give uncomfortable information, I'm going to do it immediately. I'm going to do it clearly, and I'm not going to let the emotional discomfort of the conversation hold me back from saying what needs to be said. I'm going to do that as an act of respect and an act of service. And then part two is I'm going to receive that information exactly in the way that it's given, which is not as an attack, not personal, but as an act of service, somebody doing a hard, uncomfortable thing and coming to me with this because they care so much about me, they care so much about this company, and that I don't need to take this personally because it actually has nothing to do with me. All they're doing is articulating a problem. And so that us together as teammates can look at that problem, work through it together, and keep charging towards our shared goal. Here's the thing with Van Talk, is that when you and everybody on your team buy into this and get on the same page that this is how we're going to communicate, all of those conversations that we may be putting off right now happen way faster and they happen way easier because there's no conflict. There's no defensiveness. We're coming together and we're working together as a team. And so all of that fear and anxiety and discomfort that you're feeling around the conversation, actually none of that is going to come to pass if we can both agree and get on the same page that this is how we communicate and this is how we're going to approach this uncomfortable conversation. So Van Talk, like anything else, takes practice. It's a skill, which is why my invitation to you coming out of this is maybe don't start with the there conversation, but instead, let's talk about the butter. What are the little things that we can work through together with our team so that we can all build and practice the muscle of Van Talk? We can learn and trust each other that when we have these uncomfortable conversations, they're actually not going to be uncomfortable at all because we come to the table from this place. And when we build that muscle and we build that foundation, like building a muscle in the gym, you are able to work your way up to the heavier and heavier weights, having the bigger conversations, but approaching them in exactly the same way that you would talk about the butter. So remember when I told you that I'm a bleeding heart of a leader? This is what I mean. I love my team. I care about my team so much. And that is why I am willing to have the hard conversations, because I see them as nothing more, nothing less than an act of service and, dare I say, an act of love to show up, to say what needs to be said, and to hear what needs to be heard. Giving feedback, having tough conversations, it's not about being a hard ass. It's about being honest in service to something bigger. So now we can practice our Van Talk. And again, it's not a complete solution when it comes to leveling up your team, which is why I did another video entirely on why your team is underperforming and what exactly you need to do in order to fix it. You can see that full breakdown here in this next video. I will see you over there, and I wish you the best of luck talking about the butter. See you in the next one.